So video game adaptations, am I right? Pretty bad. We've had the original Mario movie, all the Mortal Kombat movies, the original Tomb Raider movies, etc. However, recently over the last few years, a positive view has started to be looked at on these films, with the Sonic movies being a big example, along with Detective Pikachu and how people have been reacting to the new animated Mario film coming out very soon. However, TV show adaptations are now being made, with our first having its full first season being released, with a second being greenlit, and that is of the mostly critically acclaimed PlayStation game series The Last of Us. Today I'll have a look into the making of the show and give my feelings towards its first season. The Last of Us is a post-apocalyptic drama TV show created by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann for HBO, as mentioned being based on the 2013 video game which was developed by Naughty Dog, with Druckmann being the co-director and co-writer of both the games. The show is set in 2023, where the world has been in a pandemic for 20 years, which was caused by a mass fungal infection which forces its hosts into transforming into zombie-like creatures, where different people have dealt with protecting themselves in very different ways. Our main two characters are Joel and Ellie. Joel is played by Pedro Pascal, who's a middle-aged man who is tormented by the past. This mainly links to losing his daughter on the night of the virus first hit Austin, Texas, where he lived. Now he has the task of smuggling another young girl out of the quarantine zone and across the country. A big change from the games is that this character is very much more vulnerable from these years, with a big weakness being that he is mostly deaf in one ear due to a gunshot he made after losing his daughter initially. Ellie is the girl he has to smuggle, who is played by Bella Ramsey. In the show, she is depicted to be 14, where she hasn't lost her playfulness, where she can bond with people, especially children, a whole lot easier, and can make a joke here and there too. A big thing about her is that she is immune to the infection, and could be a key in creating a vaccine after all these years. Also not relevant but a cool detail is that they pretty much build her character up to be a lesbian like a video game counterpart. For other actors, we have Nico Parker playing Joel's daughter named Sarah, Meryl Bandridge as Marlene, who is the head of a resistance named the Fireflies, who gives Joel and Tess the task of smuggling Ellie, Anna Trove as the just mentioned Tess, who is Joel's mostly romantic partner while being his smuggler partner too, Gabriel Luna as Tommy, who is Joel's younger brother and former soldier who still views a hope and a better future unlike his older brother, Ratina Weasley, who is Maria, who is Tommy's pregnant wife, who is the leader of the collective settlement in Jackson. Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett play Bill and Frank, who both meet each other and become partners. Bill is a full-on survivalist who ended up protecting his house big time, while Frank is a more laid-back character, having a bit of a charm on Bill. Lamar Johnson and Kevin Montreal Woodard play Henry and Sam Burwell, who are brothers who are tried from a revolutionary movement in Kansas City. Henry is the older protected brother, while Sam is an 8-year-old who is deaf, but is still very artistic in such a cruel world. Marlene Lansky as Kathleen Kugelin, who is the leader of the revolutionary movement, who is out to kill anyone who gets in their way. Jeffrey Pierce plays Perry, who is essentially Kathleen's right-hand man. John Jett is Eldstein, who is a doctor who's hiding from the revolutionary himself, but decides to protect the brothers. Storm Reed plays Riley Rebel, who is Ellie's best friend, potential lover from military school in Boston. Scott Shepard plays David, who is a preacher and leader of a cannibalistic cult who kidnaps Ellie. Then we have the original two actors of Joel and Ellie return for this show too. Troy Baker plays a member of the Settlers, while Ashley Johnson plays a much bigger role as Ellie's mother, who gives birth to her in the pandemic. There were 9 episodes for this season that released weekly from January 15th to March 12th, with Mazin and Druckmann directing both the first 2 episodes each, Peter Hall directing the 3rd episode, Jeremy Webb directing episodes 4 and 5, Jasmila Zambik directing episode 6, Liza Johnson directing episode 7, then we have Ali Abissi directing the last 2 episodes. Then both Mazin and Druckmann wrote all the episodes. Specifically, both together, they wrote the first and last episode, while Mazin wrote episodes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8, while Druckmann wrote episode 7 by himself. Now let's move on to the production for this season. Originally, a film adaptation of the original game was announced in March 2014 and was going to be written by Druckmann. However, it began to enter development hell in 2016. A year before, however, in 2018, Mazin would approach PlayStation Productions with a list of video games that could have the potential of being a show adaptation, where he would then be disappointed at the time to find out about the initially planned film, since he felt it could fit better into a show. The director would then be introduced to Druckmann through a mutual friend named Shannon Woodard in 2019. Funnily enough, we already know that Mazin was a fan who actually played the game around 12 times. Druckmann was also a fan of him from his Chernobyl series. The two then talked where Druckmann agreed that the game would better fit into a TV show better. They would go on to pitch the show to HBO a week after meeting. In March 2020, the announcement of a TV adaptation was announced to be planned at HBO, where it was expected to more cover the events of the first game. Both the creators were named to write and executive produce, while TV producer Carol Strauss and Naughty Dog president Evan Wells were also said to be executive producers, with Gustavo Santaolalla also composing, who also composed the original two games as well. Joanna Rank, who was Mazin's collaborator in Chernobyl, was then announced to be an executive producer and originally attached to be a director of the first episode in June 2020. However, he'd gone to drop out of both the roles in November due to the scheduling conflicts as a result of COVID. The same month of October 20th, HBO would then go to greenlight the series. In January 2021, Kantia Balgov was announced to be the pilot's new director, where he was interested in adapting the game for years. However, he would go on to leave the project, with him saying in October 2022 that he left the year prior due to creative differences. Rose Lamb would then go on to be added as executive producer in February 2021. Ali and Jamila was then announced to be episodes directors in April 2021. Hall would go on to be announced as a director by the Directors Guild of America in July 2021, with them also announcing Mazin directing in August, Druckmann directing in September, and then Jonathan and Webb directing in January 2022. By February, Druckmann would go on to confirm himself he was directing an episode, and felt his experience reinforced and reflected his experience in directing the games. Originally there was going to be 10 episodes, but it was reduced down to 9 during production, with the first 2 original episodes being combined after HBO executives felt the pilot wasn't going to compel viewers to tune back in the next week. This is believed to be the largest TV production in Canada, with it suggested to have a budget between $10 million to $15 million per episode. As mentioned, the season overall covers the events of the first game and its downloadable expansion named The Last of Us Left Behind from 2014. Both the creators then suggested the second season would immediately cover the game's sequel to avoid filler. However, it is expected from fans and sources for this second game to be covered in multiple seasons, with them not wanting to overtake the games in story-wise. Going back to this season, the writers made sure the characters remained true to their developments from the original game to the second game, in case the show would receive multiple seasons. Mentioned briefly before, on January 27th of this year, after the first 2 episodes released, HBO went on to renew the show for a second season. The writing team has been established this February. Casting for the show took place online via Zoom during COVID. Casting director Victoria Ridgemans wanted to honour the game, but still didn't want to be limited by it. On February 10, 2021, Pascal and Ramsey were cast as Joel and Ellie. Earlier on that day, it was reported that Mahershala Ali was offered the role of Joel after Matthew McConaughey turned down the role. The Hollywood Reporter has gone on to say that Ali did look into playing the role, but the deal was never formed. Original actresses considered to play Ellie in the original film adaptations such as Whitesy Williams and Caitlin Dever had aged out of the role by the time the show was in production, which ended up resulting for the team to completely look for new candidates. Overall, a priority to producers were to cast actors who would independently play both the characters as well as having brilliant chemistry together. Both actors fully loved in Game of Thrones, but never met before filming the show, but instantly had chemistry which developed over the course of production. Luna's casting as Tommy was announced on April 15, 2021, and Edwards was also confirmed to reprise a role as Marlene from the games. On that same month, Classic Casting released a casting call for extras with anyone over 18 could apply, and those with vehicles from 1995 to 2003 were more being recommended. Parker's casting as Sarah was on June 30th. Pearson Bartlett's casting was announced along with Con O'Neill on July 15th, with Torv's casting as Tess being announced a week later on July 22nd. By December 5th, Bartlett would go on to claim Offerman was going to be appearing in the show in a close role to his. And then 2 days later, his casting as Bill was announced, which replaced O'Neill, who dropped out due to scheduling conflicts. By February, Mazin released a casting call looking for a boy aged 8 to 14 who is deaf, black, and has experience in both American and Black American Sign Language. The company Deaf West Theatre went on to confirm that this role was for the character Sam, who would appear in 2 episodes that would be filmed in March and April. By June, Druckmann announced that Baker and Johnson would feature in the series, with their characters' names being revealed in December of that same year. Johnson Woodard's casting as Henry and Sam was announced in August. The show's teaser trailer would be released in September along with the announcement of Linsky's casting as Kathleen. Shepard's casting was revealed with the first trailer released in December. Druckmann has gone to refer to Mazin as the new take on the story's co-parent, with Mazin himself saying that the series may represent a shift in a new look of film and TV show adaptations of video games due to the show's strong narrative. Druckmann felt the most important element to adapt from the game was the soul of the characters and their relationship, whereas the gameplay and action sequences were put on a back pedal. Content that was actually cut from the original game was put into the show's story, which includes the story of Anna, which Mazin found gorgeous and demanded for its inclusion in the show. For dialogue, Druckmann has gone on to say there were parts that were borrowed from the game, while there were others that felt they could write within their own pieces. Parts of the game that were action-heavy sequences were also engaged to more focus on character and drama, which was encouraged by HBO. Druckmann even went on to talk about another PlayStation game adaptation, which was the Uncharted film, saying they were taking the opposite approach in that adaptation. Uncharted tells a story with moments from the game, whereas this show, Closer, is an adaptation allowing some changes of character perspectives. Changes like this were mainly for smaller characters' backstories, which gave a better understanding of their motivations. The game's creator was open to changing any aspects of the story, but wanted a strong reason to do so, to ensure he and Maz considered the impacts on events later on in the road. The big change from the game to the show is that the game's outbreak takes place in 2013, while the post-apocalyptic setting takes place in 2033. However, as mentioned, the show now has the outbreak take place in 2003, while the post-apocalyptic setting takes place in 2023. This is because the writers want to make the story take place at the same time as the show's release, to make it more interesting and real, and it did not affect the story a whole lot. They also added the outbreak's origin to the show to ground the narrative also. Following COVID, they recognized audiences would have a far more knowledge about viral pandemics than what they used to know. They also removed spores as the vector through which the infection spread in the games, now replacing it with tendrils that form a unified, interconnected network. This is because they felt the use of gas masks did not translate well into TV, and that spores were also an unrealistic threat. Finding that, replacing it with the interconnected network increasing tension. From the visual standpoint, the infection was also inspired by jellyfish stings, after Sabanik sent an image to Mazin during pre-production. Jason Nolan was also supervising location manager of the season and began work preparation in January 2021, which led to a team of 115 people that found and transformed more than 180 locations. When the cast and crew entered Canada for preparation of filming, they had to quarantine for 2 weeks due to COVID restrictions. Our cinematographers are Kansia Sandra, who worked with Balgov, Mazin, Druckmann and Johnson, and then we have Eben Bolter, who worked with Hort and Webb, and then we have Christine A. Mayer, who worked with Sabanik. Then our last cinematographer is Nadine Carlson, who worked with Abayasi. Filming lasted for 200 days, with around 18 to 19 used for each episode, which ensured 2 to 3 pages of the script was filmed a day. This began in Calgary, Alberta on July 12, 2021, which was a week behind the original schedule. They then moved to High River and Fort Malcloyd through the month, where they replicated Austin, Texas for the first episode. They then moved back to Calgary in August, where Balkov completed his work on August 30th, and Hall would complete their work on October 5th. Druckmann had his work complete on November 7th, and in the same month, production moved to Canmore, Alberta, where they replicated Jackson, the Mount Royal University, and Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. Sabanik completed their work by December 9th. Webb started their work in March 2022 and was the one who finished the whole of filming in June. Calgary was used again to replicate Tansic City for his work in March. Reshoots would occur for the Texas scenes in late May and early June in Olds, and then the High River in that June. These reshoots finished in early hours of June 11th, which was again 2 days after its original schedule. Additional photography, however, took place in Kansas City on October 4th. As mentioned, Santola composed the score along with David Fleming. Santola wrote the show's opening theme before Fleming's involvement, and said Latino viewers would recognize touches of his music, and he also drew inspiration from his past experience on composing on film and TV, with some big ones being Jane the Virgin from 2014 to 2019 and Making a Murderer from 2015 to 2018. He also decided to recraft his previous work on the games instead of composing new work, so he could focus on elements he found interesting. Fleming's work was personally inspired by real-world sounds. The season's soundtrack that features 66 tracks was released by February 27th of this year. The first episode features songs like Tomorrow by Avril Lavigne and White Flag by Dido, which was to foreshadow Sarah's fate and Jola's whole character arc. The final scene and credits of the episode featured the song Never Let Me Down Again by the Fichi Mode, which Mazin chose due to its blend of upbeat sounds and dark lyrics. The song then features in the 6th episode, but this time as a cover from the creator's daughter Jessica to overall reflect on Ellie feeling like she let Joel down. The 3rd episode features the song Long Long Time by Linda Ronstadt, which was used to exhibit themes of unfulfilled love and how time heals wounds, which echoes into the story of Bill and Frank's relationship. Streams for that particular song increased significantly after the episode's release as well. The song Alone and Forsaken by Hank Williams was previously used in the original game and one of its trailers, and was also used in one of this show's trailers as well, and even featured in the 4th episode. They also reused Etta James' version of I Got You Babe, which was from the original game's DLC due to its romantic lyrics in joyous music which mirrored the feelings Ellie and Riley had for each other. The same episode also used Take On Me by a-ha to reflect on the same thing, and Ellie's overall journey. A cover of that song was also used in a trailer for the show too. It was also sung by Ellie's character in the second game. Going back to the production team, they had 5 art directors and 100 of technicians. The game's art director, concept artist, and environmental artist provided feedback on the costumes and sets of this season. The show's costume designer, Cynthia Ann Summers, found it more difficult of a task than making outfits for a fantasy or period pieces. She made sure to make Joel's outfit demonstrate a lack of consideration, as he would have little thought about how he looks. Mazan's biggest request to Summers and her team was to focus on minor details that would be relevant in an apocalyptic setting. For example, shoelaces being belts. Barry and Sarah Gower, who worked with Mazan on Chernobyl, were tasked to create the prosthetics for the infected. Barry appreciated how the series avoided stereotypical zombie looks, such as the pronounced cheekbones, sunken eyes, blood, and overall typical gore. Their team overall created a large reference library of fuzz, slime, mold, shelf mushrooms, butter mushrooms, different textures and colours. They also found themselves looking back at the original concept art of the first game as well. They had 70 actors portray the infected mob in episode 5, with 70 artists supplying prosthetics to around 30 people at a time in 3-hour shifts. The bloated suit they used was 40 kilograms and was coated in a gel-like liquid during filming to overall make it appear wet and reflective. Paul Becker and Terry Nontre choreographed this season. Nolte wanted the creatures' movements to imitate each other like schools or fish. For the filming of episode 5, he set up a boot camp to prepare background actors for this role. Editing-wise, the editors of the season were Timothy A. Good and Emily Mendez, where they edited most of the show, with Good editing on 7 episodes and Mendez editing on 4 episodes. Mark Hartels directed the 2nd episode and Cindy Moeller edited the 8th as well. Good was personally friends with Mazan after wanting to work with him after checking out Chernobyl. Originally they had an editor attached to the show entirely, however they left due to scheduling conflicts, where Good would then join the series after working on the Umbrella Academy Season 3. Mendez also worked the 3rd episode being Good's assistant editor. This is where he would show her work to Mazan, who agreed to let her co-edit the 7th episode, Left Behind, which was her favourite part of the games. This is where she would then co-edit for the 5th, 6th and 9th episode too. Good personally chose not to play the game and felt that raw footage instructed his emotional instincts better. He also used Suntola's soundtrack from the original game as a temp score while editing and found it influencing his decisions. 16 visual effects teams worked on this season, being supervised by Alex Wang, although there were around 250 visual effects shots in each episode. A 650-person team that worked at DNEG worked on 535 shots for the series overall in 18 months. They primarily focused on environmental effects, which includes the scenes set in Boston, Kansas, Jackson, and Salt Lake City. Field trips were even made to gather resources, and the team regularly referenced the games. All teams consulted with Naughty Dog's concept artists when creating the effects for the infected. All of these teams also worked on the 5th episode's action sequence. That episode had around 350 to 400 visual effects shots. The studio lastly created the show's title sequence, which was to demonstrate the unrelenting nature of the fungus. Mazan has gone to say he enjoyed the idea of the fungus in the episodes to be beautiful despite its destructive nature. Anyways, let's have a look into the show's promotions and release. On an annual day for the games, on September 26, 2021, HBO released the first image of Pascal and Ramsey in costumes, followed by a still of the show at the Summer Game Fest on June 10, 2022. The first footage of the show was then shown in an HBO Max trailer during the premiere of House of Dragon on August 21, 2022. This footage featured Pascal, Ramsey, Parker, and Offerman. The decision for the game studio to develop The Last of Us Part 1, which is a remake of the first game, was partially on the potential to introduce the show's viewers to the video games. This was released for the PlayStation 5 in September 2022, and should have released on PC fairly recently around this video's release. The first teaser trailer for the show was released on The Last of Us Day in 2022. This overall received 17 million views in less than 24 hours on Twitter and YouTube. Google would go on to release an Easter egg in late January, which was where you could add mushrooms to the screen when searching for the show. On January 27th, the first episode was released for free on HBO Max in the US and on Sky's YouTube channel in the UK. However, I have noticed it is now private on YouTube now, and I have no clue about its status on Max since, well, I'm not in the US. To promote episode 3, Bartlett appeared on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert on January 30th, and often would appear on The Jimmy Kimmel Show on February 1st. Pascal would go on to appear on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon the next night, then hosted Saturday Night Live on February 4th. Even then, there was a skit in the show that featured the actor playing Mario in a prestige drama based on Mario Kart like this show. He then went on to be on The Late Night Show with Seth Meyers on February 15th, The Graham Norton Show on the 24th, and Hot Ones on March 9th. The show was originally indicated to begin airing in 2022. However, HBO and HBO Max Chief Content Officer Casey Bloys would go on to deny this in February of that year and said it would release around 2023, which would go on to be confirmed in the first teaser trailer, followed by leaks from HBO Max and Sky on November 2nd, 2022, where it would go on to announce the series premiere in the US for January 15th, 2023, and then released its first official poster. This season would go on to be broadcasted on HBO, then be put on 4K to stream on HBO Max in the US. It would then also be released on the following in different countries: Binge in Australia, Crave in Canada, HBO Go or Now TV in Hong Kong, Disney Plus Hotstar in India, Unext in Japan, Neon in New Zealand, HBO Go in Southeast Asia/Taiwan, and finally would air on different Sky channels and then be put on Now TV in Germany, Austria, Italy, Switzerland and the UK. The first episode had its red carpet premiere in Westwood, LA on January 9th, followed by theatre screenings in Budapest and Sydney on January 11th, and then would be moved to the New York City the next day. Behind the scenes videos titled Inside the Episode were released by HBO Max and YouTube following each episode's air. Going back to the promotion, a clip of Joel and Ellie hiding from the clicker was released on November 16th, 2022, to tease the show's appearance at CCXP. At the end of the month on November 30th, 11 character posters were revealed. Some of the cast then appeared for a panel for CCXP on December 3rd, where the first trailer was released, which featured the first appearance of Baker, Johnson and Shepard. The two game actors, along with the show's actors, would then present an award at the Game Awards 2022 on December 8th. HBO would then go on to announce that Baker would be hosting a podcast alongside with the show's creators Mason and Druckmann. By January this year, both Pascal and Ramsey featured on a cover of The Hollywood Reporter, with Pascal also being on the cover for Wired. HBO would then go on to release the first behind-the-scenes video on the 6th, and several press outlets would then also publish interviews with the cast and crew, which was recorded the previous month. Ramsey would then appear on Jimmy Kimmel, which also showed a clip from the series on January 9th, and the same would happen on The Late Late Show hosted by James Corden the next day. A season trailer was then released after the airing of the first episode, and a 2-hour trial for the first game's remaster was then made available on PlayStation Plus premium memberships. The seasons are set to release for digital purchase on April 11th for those who don't want to subscribe to a streaming service to see it, and it is going to be released on disc on July 18th. A steelbook will also be available in the UK. Critically, Rotten Tomatoes has given the season a 96% based on 455 reviews, and Metacritic has given it a 84 out of 100 based on 42 reviews. The first episode received 4.7 million views in the US on its first day of availability. This both includes live views from HBO and the streamer viewers from HBO Max, which overall makes it the second largest debut for the network since 2010. The first is House of Dragon. It was streamed for a total of 223 million minutes in its first 3 hours. That number then increased to over 10 million after 2 days, 18 million after a week, 22 million in 12 days, and then 40 million within 2 months. It was the biggest premiere for an HBO Max in Latin America too. The second episode then got 5.7 million views on its first night, which then was a 22% increase from the week before, making it the largest second-week audience growth for HBO drama series in its history. From January 16th to 22nd, the episodes were streamed for 837 million minutes, which made it beat House of Dragon's first 2 weeks. By January 31st, the 2 episodes had 21.3 million views. The third episode had 6.4 million views on its first night, which was a 12% increase. The show was then streamed for 1.19 billion minutes from January 30th to February 5th, and then it was then streamed for 1.1 billion minutes the next week after that. The fourth episode had 7.5 million views, which was a 17% increase and a 60% increase compared to its first episode. By March 6th, the first 5 episodes made almost 30 million views across HBO and HBO Max views. The next week, on March 12th, the first 6 episodes made 30.4 million views, which was the highest view count for HBO series since the 8th episode of Game of Thrones, and it also beat the view count of the whole of House of Dragon. The 7th episode had 7.7 million views on its first night. The final 2 episodes then got 8.1 and 8.2 million views, which was a 74 and 75% increase from the first. This for sure increased the sale of the games as well. In January, the remaster was the 8th most downloaded PS5 game in America and the 10th in Europe. On the PS4, the second game was the 7th most downloaded in both of the regions, while the first game, the original remaster, for that console was 13th in America and 15th in Europe. Over here in the UK, the PS4 remaster increased in sales by 337% over the previous week, and the PS5 remaster increased over by 305% as well. The week after, the PS5 remaster increased by another 32%, and the PS4 one increased by another 27%. The second game increased by 317% in that month. This season was some ride. You can tell it was a story that was loved and cherished by these creators. I think most changes that they did were valid to make it more progressive, artistic, or realistic. I know this isn't going to be a thing for every single person in the world, but for sure it is going to be a show for the fans of the game, or just apocalyptic stories alone, that focuses way more on character this time, which is something that these fans, including me, can love. We have a lot of subtle moments and teased action that all focus on the humanity aspect of this thing in the world. This is something that the games mainly want us to focus on, which I love, but at the same time I do want to see a little bit more action in Season 2. Just that it's also a big part of the games as well. I do appreciate the teasing of more of this world, and the most violence we have is between humans just trying to survive in their own ways, making hard emotional choices. All the actors just do amazing jobs, especially Pedro and Bella, who fit into their roles perfectly, and now I can't really imagine too many other actors really playing these characters. The cameos from the original voice actors are awesome too, especially Johnson's as Ellie's mother, which sheds how a moment in this world can just be as happy and sad in the real world. I am also looking forward for the next season, how they adapt the second game, with how much they're building up to the plot points, which is just so brilliant so far. I'd like to say what a brilliant job Maz and Druckmann, the cast, the crew, and HBO have creating a show which is connected with so many people so far. I give the season a 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 10. So that was me covering The Last of Us Season 1, guys. Honestly, I am looking so forward for Season 2, and I hope you are as well. I know there is a few people that aren't the biggest fan of this first season, but it is a very critically acclaimed, fan-acclaimed show so far. And to the people who aren't really a fan of Season 2, how are you going to cope with it? Do you think they're going to do a good job of adapting the story so you like it, or do you think it's just going to go down the same path? Personally, I'm a fan of Part 2 in the games and actually kind of prefer Part 2 over Part 1. I know I'm a bit of a minus in the whole fandom about that one. But yeah, I'm really looking forward for Season 2 and this whole show as well. So just let me know about it, every thought you really have about this franchise, because it's a franchise that I've loved for quite a while now, and it's kind of becoming my favourite game, video game-wise. So yeah, comment down below, like the video if you liked it. If you've seen my content for a while, please consider subscribing, it will mean the world to me. But at the end of the day, I just want you guys to watch a video which goes over something that you love. I personally love making these videos, that's really what matters to me, but at the same time, I can't lie, as a small content creator, it would be nice having some likes, comments, subscriptions, if you get what I mean. But yeah, I've said this like 50 times now, but can't wait for Season 2, and I'm bambling on, so yeah, I'll see you for whatever I cover next.